It's such an honor to be with you, sir, Dr. Paul Craig Roberts. You are the chairman of the Institute for Political Economy here in the United States. You are a former Wall Street editor and an author of many, many books. In Europe, we love you because you have a perspective that many do not have, as you speak in broad manners about the important issues of foreign policy and the state of the American culture today. You have also been awarded outstanding contributions here in the United States for your contribution to the development of the U.S. economical policy. And we're so thrilled and honored to be with you.
Well, thank you. What it would mean, particularly if Russia and China have insulated themselves, it would mean an enormous rise in the power in Russia in the East and the complete collapse of Western power. It would be like a world revolution. And that's the last thing that the central banks in the West would want, because their main function is to expand Western financial hegemony. Look, what was NAFTA all about? The North American Free Trade Treaty, agreement, whatever it was. What it was really about was letting American banks take over Mexican banks. And the deal was, we'll put some industry in Mexico and you open your banking system to takeovers. So now I think, and I'm not absolutely confident of this, but I think that the largest owner now of Mexican banks are the American banks. And that the Mexican participation in the own banking system now has been greatly reduced, and it's now dominated by American banks who bought up Mexican banks. I think that's the case, and this was what NAFTA was about. See, but people don't understand that. Trump thinks it was just us giving away jobs. And what it really was us taking over the Mexican banking system. You know, one way we can sum all this up, many years ago, when I was a young man, I had recently gotten my PhD, and my dissertation chairman found himself the Assistant Secretary of Defense for International Security Affairs, which at the time was the most powerful position in the Pentagon. And he sent for me. And one of his jobs was to wind down the Vietnam War. This was during the Nixon administration. And he sent for me, and I came to his office, which was about the size of a football field. It was massive. I couldn't believe it was an office. And he wanted me to go to Vietnam to take over the aid programs, or to run the aid programs. Well, by then I knew that Vietnam was finished because the Congress had withdrawn support. And I knew that the aid programs would be one of the main sources for money, and that either I had to steal it and get rich and divide it up with whoever was there for protection, or they would kill me and take it. And so I told him I didn't think that was a job that could any longer be done in the way that he wanted it done, and refused. But I used the opportunity to ask him something that puzzled me. I said, how is it that we always get foreign countries to do what we want? He said, money. I said, oh, you mean foreign aid? No. We give the leaders bagfuls of money. We own them. They report to us. He didn't approve of it. But what he was telling me is there were no independent governments anywhere in Europe or anywhere that we owned them. I've never forgotten this. And some years ago, long after he had died, so I figure it couldn't hurt him, I wrote this in the newspapers. And I got 2 letters from 2 of his assistants who said, that's absolutely right. That's exactly right. They said, you're going to catch hell for this. But that's absolutely right. And then I remembered Tony Blair left office 1 year later, he's worth 50 million pounds. Where did that come from? How does the Prime Minister of England accumulate 50 million pounds? And it explains why no foreign leader represents the interest of their country over the interest of Washington. And it's why all of them have enabled Washington's wars. They're all complicit in the refugees that are overrunning Europe. It's the fault of Merkel and the French president and the Spanish and the Italian and all the rest for enabling those wars. They provided the cover. Otherwise, it was American aggression. Instead, it's a coalition of the willing. It's some kind of democracy-bringing enterprise, blah, 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 blah. So all of this immigration that's causing all these troubles in Europe, especially in Germany, which is now altering the politics of these countries, leading to the rise of what they call right-wing elements. All of this is a result of the European leaders sacrificing the interest of their country for Washington's agenda. We see it also in the hostilities toward Russia. What sense does it make for any European country to be on bad terms with Russia in our interest? What sense does it make? If there's a war, Europe is going to disappear. There's not going to be anybody there. The Russians have already said, we'll never again fight a war on our own territory. Well, that tells you right there. They're telling you. And yet, we've got all these countries, including Norway, Sweden, countries that used to be neutral, participating in NATO exercises on Russia's border. We've got Poland and Romania allowing the United States to put nuclear missiles on Russia's border. This is like signing a death warrant for your country. All of these people, all of these leaders have supported the American coup in Ukraine, which was an effort to grab the Russian naval base in Crimea, to cut them off from the Mediterranean, to prevent them with a threat in their underbelly. All of Europe supports that. They support the lies about a Russian invasion of Ukraine. Look, if the Russians invaded Ukraine, Ukraine wouldn't be there. It would take them, what, 48 hours? Ukraine, Russia? There wouldn't be a Ukraine. It makes no sense. And it makes no sense for these European leaders to align themselves with this crazy American agenda of hegemony. Look, the United States has been at war in Afghanistan for 16 years. In 16 years, the superpower has been unable to defeat a few thousand lightly armed Taliban. How is this country going to invade Russia or China? That makes no sense. It's a form of insanity. And yet Europe goes along with this. Oh, the Russian threat, the Russian threat. The Russians haven't threatened anybody. Yet we hear about it. The Russian threat, the Russian threat. What threat? Who's the peacemaker in the world? Putin. He never responds in kind to the provocations that Washington hands him. Never. Why doesn't Europe see this? Don't they understand that a conflict between the United States and Russia means the termination of Europe?
It's a paradox too when you look at the expenses, NATO expenses, when over 70% is paid by the US. It's quite clear that shifting the NATO strategy from being a defensive alliance to protect Europe upon attacks. Now the strategy has gone from being just that to joining the American, I would say, attack force, really. This is such a paradox to us. And when we look at Afghanistan, you mentioned Afghanistan, over 90% of the heroin produced in the world today is produced out of Afghanistan. So the poppy growing, which was forbidden under Taliban, soared. I mean, when you look at the statistics from the point on when the American forces went into Afghanistan, it's exploded completely, now being taken back to the US, which is ridden by a drug culture of massive proportions. Through then both Ukraine is the route and also Kosovo. So one wonders who is the American mafia today, because we remember the Al Capone of the 30s in Chicago. So who's benefiting from all of these wars and this being done today?
You know, a number of years ago, there was an investigative reporter at the San Jose, California Mercury. The paper was the San Jose Mercury. And this investigative reporter, with the support of the newspaper, published a whole series of articles showing that the CIA was running the drug trade. A lot of people have written books showing that Bill Clinton, as governor of Arkansas, was cover for that. It was part of drug running out of South America. It was involved with the Iran-Contra scandal, and that drug money was one of the ways they were getting the money to buy the weapons. Well, it caused a sensation, but of course, he had stepped on a very big snake. And the CIA was able to use other newspapers to discredit him and to turn him into some kind of anti-American person who was trying to discredit our intelligence service and blah, 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 blah. And they ended up destroying his career. And I can't remember if he was one of the people who eventually was suicided. You know, a lot of times these people who get in the way, they're found dead, and the verdict is always suicide. Well, what happened to him kind of stopped any other journalist's interest in the obvious facts, because he lost his career. He was essentially destroyed. So they knew, you can't write about this, you can't deal with this. Well, of course, that just makes it easier for the CIA. And if you are an intelligence service like the CIA, which has legitimate parts, you know, the analysts who are just supposed to provide information, but it unfortunately got married with the black ops part, the the kind that goes around overthrowing governments and assassinating political leaders. And this, where does their budget come from? The CIA has many front companies that it uses to disguise its operations, its black operations. As far as we know, some of these companies may be very profitable. Clearly, the drug trade would be an immense revenue source for a black operation. So clearly, that part of the CIA, the unaccountable part, the unknown part, essentially, would have a great interest in running the drug business. And you have to think about who does run it. It can't, in Afghanistan, it would have to be the United States. The Taliban was against it. So what other force is there? If it's not the Taliban running it, then it's the CIA. And it's enormous. So that then is a source of, what, hundreds of billions of dollars? And laundered, unaccountable money. And who helps, what parts of the banking system help the CIA in this? Most likely all the big banks. I mean, you get really right down to it, you don't really know who controls what.
Thank you very much. We are so honored to have spoken to you.
Well, thank you very much for including me in your wonderful programs.